We're continuing on in our study of second chapter of Daniel, and now we're to the point of the dream is revealed. If you recall, right beginning of this chapter, the King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. It troubled him. He couldn't sleep. He calls all the Chaldeans, the wise people of the country, in to interpret the dream. Not only interpret the dream, but tell them the dream. While the New King, or the King James version of this account indicates that Nebuchadnezzar forgot the dream, the newer translations don't have that inclination. So whether he forgot the dream or whether he's putting these guys to the test, either way, they say they can't do it. Verse 10, he says, "There's not a man on earth who can do this. Do what the king asks." So King Nebuchadnezzar, and the combination of the fear that he had over this dream, he was troubled, and the combination of anger brought him to the point, that's a combination that always gives us the best possible judgment. And he says, all right, kill them all. Not only kill them, make their homes an outhouse. And so we saw that last week. And in comes Daniel. This is when Daniel comes into the picture. Daniel is a man for this crisis. And last week we saw that in verse 14 that one of the characteristics he had in this crisis is that he was composed. He spoke to Arioch, the executioner, with wisdom and tact. In verse 15, 16, he's courageous. He's saying to Arioch, hey, what's the rush? Get me before the king, and I'll get things slowed down here. Courageous that he goes before the king, who wants to kill all of his cohorts. And he asks for the one thing the king wouldn't give the rest of the Chaldeans, and that's time. And some of the translations indicate that Daniel asked for a specific time. Hey, give me till tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Then you can do whatever. Maybe. And then we saw in verse 18 that he had his communion with God. He got the time from Nebuchadnezzar. He goes home. He tells his friends, hey, come pray with me. This is a situation. Our lives are in danger. We're going to be executed if God doesn't come through here, if God is not faithful. And then when he gets his answer, he commends God. He gives praise to God, verses 20 to 23. I thank you and praise you, O God of my fathers. You've given me wisdom and power, and you made known to me what we asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king. So that gets us to the next one. We see Daniel's marked with compassion. Verse 24, then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men of Babylon, and said to them, do not execute the wise men of Babylon. Take me to the king, and I will interpret his dream for him. Now Daniel's in control of this situation. The last order that Arioch had was from Nebuchadnezzar, go kill them all. And now we've got this little Hebrew kid coming up and say, don't kill him. This little exile from Judah, only been in the kingdom 3 years, and here he's telling the head executioner to defy the order from the king. And I think it was Daniel's compassion for the other wise men. All the other Chaldeans, the enchanters, the diviners, the magicians, the astrologers, the architects, all those guys worshipped pagan gods. Daniel knew that they were going to hell, that they were lost. He wanted them a chance to find the real God before they died, and so he didn't want them to die. And really, that it's not necessarily in his interest. Of course, he'd probably be in that mess of people being killed if it didn't come through. But it would have been in the best interest of Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego had the rest of the Chaldeans been killed. We'll find out in chapter 3 and in chapter 6, these are the guys that brought all sorts of problems into the Hebrews' lives while in Babylon. So in verse 25, he says, Arioch took Daniel to the king at once. I mean, he rushed in there. He said, I have found a man among the exiles of Judah who can tell the king what his dream means. He took him at once in other translations in haste. He rushed in there. I believe that Arioch didn't want to carry out this order. First of all, these weren't enemies of the kingdom. They were probably frequently in the king's room next to the executioner. The head guard, he probably knew some of them. He didn't want to kill them. But notice too, Arioch takes the credit. I found the Hebrew that can do this for you. He wants to take the credit for that. Verse 26, the king asked Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it? I mean, after Nebuchadnezzar heard everything from the Chaldeans, the astrologers, etc., no man can do this. There's not a man on earth who can do what the king asks. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they don't live among men. And here we get to another characteristic of Daniel in verse 27, humility. Verse 27, Daniel says, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he had asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that pass through your mind as you lay on your bed are these. Notice how he approached that. I would have done it just the opposite. Nebuchadnezzar's mad at the astrologers for saying, nobody can do this. Daniel comes in and says, nobody can do this. I would have gone and said, there's a God that does this, and he's told me. I wouldn't go in and say, no, I can't do it. I mean, the executioner's right next to him. And the other thing Daniel could have done is said, yep, I can do it. It's me. I did this. I mean, he had every indication he could have done that. He's good looking, according to chapter 1. He's handsome. He's got some brains between his ears. He's, as said in chapter 1, he's 10 times wiser than any of the others. And yet he gives credit to God. Verse 28, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that pass through your mind as you lay on your bed are these. So Daniel's really set things up here. Daniel's really set things up here to show that these false deities, these false gods that the culture has worshipped were absolutely worthless. He's setting the true God against these false deities. So in verse 28, it has that in days to come. And according to scholars, that means not just tomorrow or the next day, but a long distance future. And in fact, once we look into this the next couple weeks, we're going to see that this dream, this prophecy has to do with the history all the way to the millennial kingdom. Verse 29, Daniel's stating to him, as you were lying there, O king, your mind turned to things to come, and the revealer of mysteries showed you what is going to happen. It's interesting now that he's saying that Nebuchadnezzar's mind was turning to things to come, laying there, what's going to happen after me? He's not thinking about what am I going to eat tomorrow? How much wine am I going to have tomorrow? Which of my harem's going to visit me? Or, who's going to conquer? Who's going to give me a gift or compliment me? He's thinking long term here. Not only is Daniel going to tell him the dream, he's telling Nebuchadnezzar what he was thinking at the time. Now put yourself in Nebuchadnezzar's place. This young Hebrew is not only telling me where I was. Of course, if you have a dream, you're going to be in a bed, right? So you say you're lying there in your bed. Okay, that anybody can deduce that. But just have the idea that, hey, you were thinking about what's going to happen after you. That had to get Nebuchadnezzar's attention. And then he says the revealer of mysteries showed you what is going to happen. And that's the first time, of course, the revealer of mysteries is referring to God. It's the first time that's ever been used as a name for God in the Bible. And he's revealing this mystery to a pagan god. The whole idea, well, we've seen it in the story of Joseph and Pharaoh. God revealed prophecy to Pharaoh through a dream that Joseph was able to interpret, and we see a similar situation here. And it may speak, too, to the character of Nebuchadnezzar, that first of all, he was thinking about the future, not about his next drunken party, that God entrusted him with this vision into the future. But remember, too, that this is God's plan. God has orchestrated this whole situation. Daniel and his friends are in Babylon because of Israel or Judah, or the Jews, the Hebrews' disobedience. They're pursuing idolatry, and God is disciplining them through this exile. This exile takes place in 3 stages. This is the first one where these young men are brought to Babylon, and then there's 2 more. At the end of that second or third exile, deportation, there's hardly anybody left in Jerusalem. The city's just abandoned. The old and firmed are there, and nobody can mount any sort of kingdom there when they're left. But God has orchestrated this. He's allowed Nebuchadnezzar to conquer Jerusalem, exile these people here. He's put the dream into Nebuchadnezzar's head. He's put Daniel in the group of people that the king uses for advisors. And he's given Daniel the ability to interpret dreams and visions. God has orchestrated all of this. Verse 30. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I'm greater wisdom than the other men, but so that you, O king, may know the interpretation and that you may understand what went through your mind. So here's Daniel's humility again. He says, I can't take the credit. God has done this for his own purpose. Verse 31, you looked, O king, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were broken to pieces at the same time and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace, but the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream, and now we will interpret it for the king. Verse 37, you, O king, are the King of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed mankind and beasts of the field and birds of the air. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are that head of gold. Nebuchadnezzar's got to be feeling pretty good about himself right now. After you, another kingdom will rise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly of iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united any more than the iron mixes with clay. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of the mountain, but not by human hands. A rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true, and the interpretation is trustworthy. Verse 46, and King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and revealer of mysteries, for you are able to reveal this mystery. Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. Moreover, at Daniel's request, King Nebuchadnezzar appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the provinces of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. And you'll see in this slide, you have the head of gold, which is Nebuchadnezzar, the chest and arms of the silver and the Medo-Persian Empire, the belly of brass, which is a Greece led by Alexander the Great, and then the Roman Empire, legs of iron. And then we'll get into more of this prophecy in the next week or 2 or 4, however long it takes to get through the passages I just read. But the stone cut not from human hands, that's Christ. Christ that defeats all these worldly kingdoms, that brings us to the one kingdom, the millennial kingdom at the end times. In the back of your bulletin, I've got a quote there from Voddie Baucham about the Bible. Here's one of those instances. Eyewitnesses during the lifetime of other eyewitnesses reporting supernatural events that took place in fulfillment of specific prophecies and claims their writings are divine and not of human origin. In this dream, God outlines what's going to happen over the next several centuries, what big kingdoms will be taking over the world in those times, and then what he's going to do in the end times. Daniel is betting on God's faithfulness to come through in this dream, and God did not disappoint. And we too can count on God's faithfulness as we walk out that door. Faithfulness that we can trust him, that he is trustworthy and faithful beyond our imagination.